Now, last New Year's Eve, I did this video on New Year's Day. It was Ukraine and Russia, day 312, and I was just talking about what I see moving forward. My crystal ball is fairly murky, so my predictions aren't like, something great, but I pay attention. When you read a few hours a day, spending time a few hours a day for 600 some odd days, you learn some things. At this point, I was only 300 days in, and I only had an audience of about 2,000 subscribers or so. So I concocted my own questions. In fact, if I go back far enough, I have some videos where I only have like 30 some odd views from the early days. It's kind of still funny to me, but that's better than when I look back at it last time and I only had like 6 or 7 on some of these videos. At any rate, this year I asked my community, what are your questions about what will happen in 2024? So we're just going to go through and look at what you asked, and I'll give you the best answer I can. Again, my crystal ball is murky, so maybe it'll be right, maybe it won't, but it'll be at least an informed question or informed answer. If I had a question, it would be, what is the world going to look like if there's no further American aid for Ukraine? That's theoretical. You will have further American aid from Ukraine. The question is America going to be the leader of this, or is Europe going to step up and assume its leadership role in Europe? And so I think you're going to still have American aid there. And Europe is going to need us, and Germany is beautifully stepping up in a meaningful way, and I think that's going to be a very healthy thing. But what would it look like without American aid? Well, a lot of bad things would happen in many different places if America was completely withdrawn and isolated. And they won't do that for their own economic interests, if nothing else. But because when you withdraw here, you're also going to destabilize a lot of other things at the same time. And I don't believe that they're going to do that. Okay, we need a much more robust debate on how we can counter hybrid and informational warfare from Russia and others. For me, pushing that agenda in 2024 would be good. Well, that's what I've been doing the whole time, is dealing with informational warfare. I mean, I'm not a military expert, and my background is in leadership, right? So I focus on who are the players, and then I look at what are the narratives that are being produced on either side, and like why are they trying to say what they're trying to say? The information space is big, and we do need to focus on that. Next, can Ukraine acquire more non-NATO nation support? They're working on that. They're working on trying to get support from like South America. This was one of the reasons that Zelensky went to Argentina. He was working on that angle. Africa is a harder bet because Russia is really in Africa in multiple places, as Russia has economic and military ties there. Okay, why does Europe not support more individually or in unison? And are all of us ordinary Europeans in general quite unaware of what's going on, sticking our heads in the sand? So I'm an American. I can't really speak to how Europe, what the media is doing there and that kind of thing. I'm not there. My read is that it's very similar to the United States, though. And I think that we all need to pay more attention. But we'll pay more attention. Okay, let me go back. I was at a football game, and my son pointed out how pathetic the cheerleaders were, and the cheerleaders would have such a hard time getting the fans riled up as long as the team wasn't winning. When the team started winning, the cheerleaders could, gain momentum and get them really going. I think it's the same kind of thing in Ukraine. Unless there's some victories, nothing succeeds like success, right? Unless there are some victories to point to, the media doesn't take notice, the people are apathetic, whatever. And they shouldn't be, but I think that's the reality of how they are. How much of a difference will F-16s make, and can Congress hinder delivery of planes and missiles? Can Congress stop deliveries of planes and missiles that the USA makes from third parties? So that's more of a Biden than Congress as commander-in-chief as far as deciding you can or can't do something. I don't know that Congress is going to hinder this in a big way. But the first question was, how much of a difference will F-16s make? I think they'll not be a game changer in the sense of overturning or changing the whole dynamics of the war, but having air parity, if not air superiority, I don't think this is going to be something where now that we have F-16s, we're going to blow up all the frontline minefields and just go, just take Crimea in a week. Or it's not going to be that kind of thing. But F-16s are going to back the Russian Air Force up significantly. Now, war has changed radically in the last 20, 30 years, where air defense artillery or air defense kind of missiles and that kind of thing has really been much larger than it seems like it has been in the past. And so F-16s will be pronounced, and I think it'll like bring Ukraine up to some kind of parity with Russia, but I don't think it will I don't think it'll be the big game changer. Part of the reason is that the Biden administration is really careful, and they don't want to cross these red lines, and so they haven't allowed American weapons and American vehicles and things like that to cross into Russia. If they had, I think that would be a very different experience. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Prof, will U.S. politics get serious to help Ukraine in 24, or will they just continue to sue each other and the impeachment? Okay, when politicians are fighting, that's their natural organic state. That's the way it works. That's when they have freedom. That's when they're not in an emergency state. So that's good in that sense. But yes, they do tend to fight a little bit too much for most people's taste. And I think that they will continue to fight. I think you'll see three phases of this. I think you'll see an early phase of dealing with the border Ukraine aid, and then you'll see another phase of dealing with budgetary battles and perhaps a shutdown, and then you'll see another phase later on, right around the election, when you're seeing who's actually going to win in 2024 in November. So those are the three big things I would be looking for. But I think Ukraine will get aid. I don't know how much, but I'm pretty confident they're going to work something out. Okay, and again, the big one will be what happens in the election in November. Increase in asymmetric attacks on the Russian oil infrastructure. Ukraine has already shown the ability to destroy a rail tunnel along the Russian-North Korea border. Well, it's actually the Mongolian border, but nonetheless. Okay. Ukraine is fighting because, so you fight with what you have, and Russia is fighting with men because they don't mind sending them to slaughter. They're happy to expend men. Ukraine can't fight that way. If they fight that way, they lose. They're fighting asymmetrically. What they've done to the Black Sea Fleet has been amazing, but they have to fight that way because they can't really get across those trench, the trench lines, the minefields, those emplacements, not with the weapons and tools that they have. So they're fighting asymmetrically, and you're going to see more of that asymmetric warfare moving forward until they have some kind of advantage that allows them to be able to do something different. Your thoughts on if how Biden's stance on Ukraine will change from a just-in-time drip feed, as long as it can stance to Ukraine on Ukraine, to a more forceful, we are going to make Ukraine win, here's all the stuff that you need stance. I think when we look back, the story of the war in Ukraine will be we didn't do enough for them fast enough. Last year, when I was doing the New Year's video, I said, I don't think we're going to be done by this time next year. And I mean, it's not prophetic. It's just, I didn't think we're going to be done. We're just doing things far too slow. And we'd say, okay, well, now we'll give you tanks. Well, by the time we agreed to we should give you these tanks, you should have already had them. But we didn't want to trip over a Russian red line of we're going to nuke you or we're going to be at war with you and NATO. And so Putin has deterred the West very well. I mean, I got to give him credit for that, unfortunately. And I don't know that that's going to change. A fundamental reaction from Biden is, let's not provoke them. That is the way that he reacts to things, and he comes to things very slowly. Now, when I say that, the Republicans are worse in the sense of only half of the Republicans are with Ukraine, and the other half are actively trying to scuttle Ukrainian aid. Not because necessarily they're pro-Russian, some might be, but because they want to do other things with it. They don't want to focus on that. Let's focus on this. Now, some may very well be, pro-Russia. I'm not saying that they're not, but Yeah, the story of this is going to be we were way too slow in order to support, and which is unfortunate because, like, look back at Vietnam and President Diem, or look back at trying to support the Afghani leaders or whatever, and these guys were all like, I don't want to fight, we don't want to do anything of this, and Zelensky was like, I need ammunition, help, we'll fight. So to not support when that's the scenario seems mind-bogglingly stupid to me, but. Okay, what kind of weapons will Ukraine be able to produce on its own in 2024? That is a great question. Okay, so Ukraine is now, and this is one of my great big hopes, Ukraine is creating their own homegrown Ukrainian weapons, building their factories, building the pieces, getting stuff done. Now, they have to be careful with it because they have to logistically make sure that they're decentralized enough that rocket doesn't take out everything, right? So, but when they have Ukrainian weapons, they can take that fight to Russia. And on the other side of this, they're going to be a big weapons producer in the world. Okay, if supplies of equipment and longer range weapons remain hamstrung, I don't expect any improvement. No, you're right. I mean, there has to be something materially changing to see improvement. And for Russia, that's a winning scenario. Just hanging on, Russia feels like it's winning. Even though when you look at the reality is 3 days or 3 weeks, and now we're on day 670 something. I mean, come on. Okay. Do you think Putin will accidentally have a heart attack so Russia can surrender and blame him? I'm not predicting that, but that is one of the few scenarios that could allow normalcy to come back to Europe. If something were to happen to Putin, and I'm not predicting it, I don't think that that's in the cards, but if something like that did happen and he could shoulder all the blame, Russia-Ukrainian relations, Russia-European relations could, especially European relations like France and Germany and those kind of people that like want to get the investments back flowing, that could bring normalcy like just about nothing else could. I don't think between Ukraine and Russia it's going to be settled anytime soon. There's generational hatred now, and I don't blame Ukrainians at all for that. Okay, if war fatigue or apathy is going to be a factor in the U.S. military aid to Ukraine, how do you expect it to affect the media environment and electoral politics? I think war fatigue already hit us a while back. I don't think it'll be anything newer. But again, if they start winning, you'll see a resurgence, and that's what they need. They need to see actively, tangibly, measurably winning something. Amur Attack'em, Storm Shadow, Scalps coming, and his Taurus coming. As far as I know, all of those are in the cards to be coming, to be slated to show up. More of these will show up, I'm pretty sure. I don't know the quantities, but yes, they're on the way, as I understand. Will weapons that have this far not been sent over be sent? Like that fancy German cruise missile, I don't know that, but I mean, again, as they continue to show that they're winning, they will get more and more munitions. Why doesn't the U.S. weapons industry force GOP to continue to support Ukraine? They can't. They simply can't. I mean, that's a misread of how politics works here. I'm pretty sure EU countries will drop U.S. suppliers if the country proves to be an unreliable partner. I don't think so, because even on the back end, they're going to want U.S. technology and weaponry. So that's not going to happen. But the weapons industry can't really do that. That's a narrative that actually is being pushed by Russia, that it's just the greedy military industrial complex trying to make this happen. They can't. Can they have some influence? Sure, but they're not going to change the minds if voters are breathing in and inhaling and imbibing Russian narratives, telling their politicians, we don't support this. If that's what's happening, like through third party Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson, folks like that. So that's the information of space warfare is far more powerful than the weapons industry trying to turn the screws on politicians. What are the Ukrainian and Russian objectives in 2024, given both sides are digging in? Ukraine's trying to hold on and figure out how they can gain an advantage and overthrow. Russia's trying to hold on and just hold on and take these and hold on to their four captured oblasts that they now think are part of Russia. they don't want to lose those. That, I think those are the objectives in 2024. Ukraine's trying to figure out how to break it. Russia just wants to hang on. And if Russia can take more, they would gladly take more in the process. I said earlier I wasn't optimistic last year that it'll be over by the end of 2023, and I don't think it'll be over by the end of 2024 unless something materially changes in a significant way. But given all the cards that we can see on the table right now, I don't think it'll be over next year. And this is absolutely tragic. My biggest question is how to make the Pentagon experts actually understand the stakes in Ukraine, the Russian culture, Russian and Soviet history. That's really interesting because that's a great observation. We tend to see things through our own lens, and like as an American, I think, oh, surely they wouldn't do that, and yet they do it. Whether it's torture or rape or whatever, using those kinds of things, indiscriminately killing in Bucha. And then I realized, no, we're dealing with different people with different ideas of what's okay, or like even thinking about them sending their own men to be just slaughtered in mass to take Advika for no real advantage, just so Putin can like make his name. And you just think, how could he do that? But he can, because that's how he does. And we have to understand the enemy. I think Tim Snyder's book, The Road to Unfreedom, would be a very helpful primer for most of these politicians that are opposed to it. Yeah, but I don't know how to get it into their heads. Europeans, especially those who have been gobbled up before, understand it a bit more, but they're coming from way behind because they've spent decades bludgeoning off the U.S. that's freeloading to an American. Okay, yes, when I talk to those from former Soviet-controlled states, they are standing with Ukraine in a big way because they understand the evil that they're up against. But Europeans have gotten used to kind of waiting for the U.S. to like, okay, come on, you're the U.S., you can give this money and you can make this happen. And the politicians that are isolationists point to that and say, look, we're not your sugar daddy, stop. Like, you take up for your own backyard. So both sides really need to stand up. And I think the U.S. really does need to lead, as much as it's painful, as much as it's costly. If you're a leader, you're a leader, and you have to lead even when it's not convenient. Okay, where's Winston Churchill when you need him? Well, I need ammunition, not a ride. Was a Churchillian moment of the decade. I see Zelensky as Winston Churchill for his time, somebody wrote, and I think that's right. And Zelensky's done a very good job. He was almost custom designed for this particular role, given his media background. He's not a military genius, but he's relying on Zelensky for this, and but he's very good at doing his diplomatic role. Okay, why isn't Ukraine attacking St. Petersburg to make the war more visible to Russians? What will both sides do to mark the February anniversary? Have you seen any polls on the popularity of Zelensky and Zelensky? Okay, so first, it's a double-edged sword. If they do more, then Putin could potentially... It could potentially hurt Putin with his re-election, right? Like, it's not going to be a real election, but it could potentially hurt Putin. It could potentially help him if he, drums up the patriotic kind of thing. So I don't know what to think about that. What will they do to mark the February anniversary? I'm sure there'll be fireworks, but I don't know what it'll look like. Have you seen any polls on the popularity of Zelensky and Zelensky? Yes. And they're both very popular, and there's a concerted effort from the Russian information space to try to drive a wedge between them. I don't think that there is that desire in Ukraine or elsewhere with allies to see that happen, but the Russians certainly would like to see that happen. Will the West, U.S., learn from World War I that peace cannot be achieved without victory? Man, it's not just the U.S. So there are two factions in Europe, particularly, right? There's a faction that wants to make Russia pay, and there's a faction that wants to just have peace at any price. And they're about equally split in some countries. Like in Germany, and Germany and France particularly, it was almost even at one point. I don't know where the poll is now, but the one that wants peace at any price just wants to go back to normal. And that's the dangerous crowd, to my mind. They need to fix this. They need to secure the win and then get your children back, get reparations for the damage that they caused, all those kind of things. Without that, that peace is going to be too costly a peace while they rearm, in my estimation. At what point in the war will Ukraine take out the Crimean Bridge? I think if they could have done it already, they would have done it. But I think they're also getting greater and greater capability to be able to do it. And they're now going to be thinking strategically about when they can do it as well. But I don't know. That may be something for the 2-year anniversary. I don't know. Love your work, but chances are that you don't know a whole lot more about what's going to happen in Ukraine than we do. So let's not try to make any predictions. Right. My crystal ball, I told you, is murky. I'm just telling you what it appears to me given the cards that are on the table. So, but I have spent a lot of time paying attention to what's going on here. So this is what I can see, given I'm not on the front lines. I'm not in the rooms where they're making the decisions. Should the USA and EU destabilize Russia to the point where smaller regions can be independent of Moscow's influence? At least not in the short term, no. So you want... I know some people want Russia to totally collapse and be chaos and be Mad Max and just warring tribal leaders. I don't want that for a couple reasons. Nukes, I don't want that to be floating around willy-nilly. I also want a solitary, unified way of making sure that orderly all Ukrainian children are returned and reparations are made. So I don't want it to be destabilized and fall apart. That is a Moscow narrative, though, that the West just wants to tear us into pieces. I don't want that. I want them to be beaten, unified, and then make sure all these children come back, reparations are paid, that kind of thing. Deadlock in U.S. Congress, aid package to Ukraine, and the issue with our media networks talking Russian propaganda. I'm not sure what you're asking. I think the deadlock will be unlocked pretty shortly. It's a normal, natural political process, but we don't like politicians for a reason, and this is one of the reasons. Politics isn't geared for urgency. Okay, what would Donald Trump's policy toward Ukraine actually be from January 2025? Can Ukraine win before the Republicans come to power in the U.S.? So if you talk to a Republican, they tend to have a different view of Trump. But this was a this is counterfactual, meaning you can't really go back and prove this. But they tend to believe, rightly or wrongly, that if Trump was in power when the invasion of Ukraine never would have happened. And 2, if Trump was in power, he never would have let this stand because his ego wouldn't have allowed that. Okay, so now we passed that time period, that counterfactual time period, and we're now to a place where if you're on the left side of the spectrum, you tend to lean more toward Biden's position. And if you're on the right side of the spectrum, Trump has taken the opposite position, maybe to differentiate himself. I don't know. Maybe to just say, hey, he's doing a lousy job. I don't know what it is. But I think the longer this has gone on, the worse it has been, in a sense that Trump has hardened his position of, just like, let's make a deal here and, like Ukraine will lose this and we'll have peace. I'm not optimistic that that Trump would come around in any meaningful way. Even more so after reading that, I didn't realize this, but that Manafort was working for, not Poroshenko, before that, Yanukovych. I don't know how I missed that particular fact, but I don't see redemptiveness in a Trump victory. Can it be won before that? Possibly. I don't see it. But Europe has to step up in a large, meaningful way. I think that's really the key here. And you have to think about America being the bridge temporarily in 2024 while Europe wakes up and defends itself. If you're depending on Trump, I don't think that's going to be a helpful thing. Now, Trump we're only 3 weeks from the first the Iowa caucuses. That's the first primary kind of thing in the United States, Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. And we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe the Republicans are going to choose a different candidate. I don't know. It looks like Trump is pretty heavily the front runner, but we'll see. But Europe really does need to step up in a huge, meaningful way. You got a year to wake up, Europe. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it, but I'm just saying the reality is I don't think you can rely on Trump for Ukraine. Okay, how's the counteroffensive going? Okay, so we had a troll. My reply to it was, I would argue, better than the Black Sea Fleet. This is what I mean by the asymmetrical warfare. And look, I would imagine you'll see another half dozen or more Black Sea Fleet ships scuttled by Ukraine over the next year. And that's going to be a pretty significant loss to Russia. So my question was, I would argue better than the Black Sea Fleet, and their reply was, I see that must mean Crimea by the summer as promised last winter. Ha 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 ha. Yeah. Okay. Well, they didn't get there. That's true. Somebody else replied, Kyiv in 3 days. How many years, bot? Which is a good answer because, yeah, it was supposed to be a 3-day to Kyiv 3-week mop-up operation, and day 670 something later. Yeah. Okay, what will those countries feel who prefer to watch and not condemn the evil aggressor Goliath country? How will UA heroes and civilian populations are bravely fighting for almost 2 years now? Yeah, you know, some countries like India just want to sit on the sideline. China wants to sit on the sideline. And I'm good with China sitting on the sideline because they could have weighed in on Russia's side and they didn't. And that's very important. Maybe they are surreptitiously, but they're really trying not to get into sanctions. Unconditional surrender is the best option for Ukraine. The sooner the better. No, this is day 676 of a 3-day special military operation, and that was the last comment here. No, it's not better for Ukraine sooner or later. You can't deal with somebody who's proven that you can't deal with them, and that's what they're dealing with. And if Putin violated the treaties and he's resorted to the battlefield, an appeal to the battlefield it'll be, and that's what he's going to get. And so that's where they are. Okay. I think over the year some things will change, but I can't predict them. I don't know how to predict anything on the battlefield, but as new weapons come online, the Ukrainians have proven one thing certainly, and that they are incredibly innovative, and they will use whatever advantages they can be provided in order to take that fight, and they won't quit fighting. And I don't think Putin has any desire to quit fighting. He's certainly shown no inclination to call it off. So I think we're still going to be here this time next year. And I hate to say that, I absolutely do, but I think that's the reality of where we are. All right, that's my New Year's questions assessment. Tell me what you think. Put any more comments in the comments below. And thank you guys for being the kinds of people that care about Ukraine.